The ways of knowing are the different ways in which we interact with the world around us. They not only affect our judgment, but they also affect the way that we extract knowledge from the world and how we come to different conclusions and develop as people. Now, the ways of knowing include sense perception, emotion, language, faith, reason, intuition, and memory, and imagination. Now, while the ways of knowing all have different effects on our lives, especially considering what type of person you are or you've developed into, they have a really big effect on our instinctive judgments. They provide a sort of check on them. So, for example, if you were to have a 12-year-old student who brought his favorite action figure to show and tell for school that day, but one of the other kids took the action figure and broke it, his first reaction might be to get revenge or to get angry, probably yell at the other kid or get in a fight with him. Of course, his emotions would probably be affirming that thought, as in his emotions of anger and probably sadness or regret for bringing his action figure to school that day would actually probably affirm what he wants to do. They drive him to want to take a more aggressive course of action and get mad at the other child. However, maybe reason would tell him to calm down. He doesn't want to get in trouble with the teacher, with his parents. He wants to be a good student. He knows he shouldn't hurt people or hit people no matter what happens. And maybe after he thinks the situation out, his reason challenges his original thought, and it leads him to a different conclusion, that maybe he should take a different course of action, maybe talk to the teacher about what happened, or talk to his parents about it to resolve the matter in a different way. Of course, that was a completely domestic example of the ways of knowing can provide and check on our instinctive judgments in an everyday situation. It's an example that really portrays the way the ways of knowing have such relevant effect on our lives, despite the fact that we're not necessarily aware of everything that they do for us or the effect that they have on us. The ways of knowing can be applied in any situation, and they can have this check on our instinctive judgments from a mundane situation such as the one I mentioned previously to even when dealing with grief. For example, I remember when my parents got divorced. I was in 2nd grade. And, I always knew my parents fought a lot and I would see them around the house. But I thought it was normal, every couple fights. It never got out of hand, and I think they always tried to keep me away from it. Of course, one day I come home from school and my dad wasn't home. He usually arrived home really, really late, so that wasn't out of the ordinary. And I'm there, and then my mom is in the kitchen, and I remember that my dad arrives, or he arrives at the house, and we go out to greet him, and I ask him where he's been. I hadn't seen him in a few days, and usually he did come home before my bedtime to try and see me. And at that moment, that's when my parents decided to tell me they were getting divorced. Now, I knew there were some people in my class with divorced parents, but I didn't really know what it meant. Now, when they told me that they wouldn't be living together anymore, my first thought was that I was going to get to see my dad again. I felt slightly betrayed, and immediately I wanted to stop listening. I kind of let my emotions take over, and I was sad and I was crying, and I wasn't taking in everything they were telling me. I wasn't considering their situation, and I went deaf. Now, I remember my dad telling me that he had his own apartment now, and that it was really nice, that I was going to like it. I actually still remember what I imagined the apartment to look like when he first told me about it. It was a very specific image. And that whole day, my emotions just completely affirmed everything I was thinking. I let them affirm that my dad didn't want to live with us anymore. that my parents had given up on their relationship, and I didn't think of it super thoroughly. But eventually, that's when my reason kicked in. My reason eventually began telling me that after I thought the situation out and after I realized why parents got divorced, I was thinking that maybe their relationship wasn't the best. Maybe it wasn't healthy for either of them, and they'd be better off living separately. Of course, that was once I'd come to the conclusion that I would see my dad every other day, and that I could talk to both my parents, and both my parents will still take care of me. And it was just a big change because they'd be living apart from each other. Now, my instinctive judgment had been to withdraw, and then my emotions of sadness and anger helped me do that. Once again, my emotions affirmed what I was thinking of doing, and they kind of took over. Eventually, that's when my reason, me thinking out the situation, it caused me to rein everything in and to actually look at the situation in a more broad perspective. And it made me come to a different conclusion rather than the one I'd instinctively, the first course of action I'd thought of taking. These were two very similar examples. However, they both had really different factors channeling in. While the emotions and the way reason was used was very similar, one example was a lot more mundane and something that you could see every day in your life, while the other one was one that was used more as a way to deal with a more serious situation or to even channel grief. But the ways of knowing aren't limited to that. They can also be used as a check on instinctive judgments in situations of happiness, of elation, of celebration. When you're at a party, it's something that can be seen every day and it can't necessarily be classified. But what the ways of knowing do is that they completely change the way you interact with the world. Your memory causes you to draw conclusions from previous times in your life, previous examples. Language changes the way you perceive things, especially how you interact with other people. Your faith can make you have a different point of view on different situations. They all have an extremely important effect on the way we view the world and the way we interact with it. They're extremely important to the way we gain knowledge and the way we know the world around us. And they practically define the way we as people interpret the situations around us. By that I mean that they really affect the conclusions we come to and therefore lead us to develop in different directions.